Women Today.
Faster, good afternoon. It's Tuesday. It's just gone 7 minutes past 2. Like to be a little bit different sometimes. And this is Women Today on Manx Radio FM with me, Beth Espy.
And me, Christy DeHaven.
And on the show today, we're going to be learning about stroke awareness and prevention as the annual Awareness Month draws to a close. Also today, these two women are pretty used to extreme fundraising.
I've done walking on hot coals and normal things that you do, sponsored silencers and sponsored walks and things, but this is a little bit different.
We do daft stuff like the tin bath races and all of that. Yeah, we did get pushed down the promenade in a wheelie bin a couple of years ago.
I love the fact that she said walking on hot coals, the usual things you do. Yeah. This Sunday, they are going to be doing something that quite literally will be life-changing. Find out what that is later. And also...
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of a team. Everything is awesome when we live in our dreams.
Well, everything is awesome at the University of Cambridge because they have introduced their first ever Lego Professor of Play. As ever this afternoon, we'd love to hear from you. If you've got any thoughts, comments or questions, you can text us. It's 166 177. Email the studio@manxradio.com, or you can go to Facebook or Twitter. Just use the hashtag #MRWomenToday. And as I mentioned, May is Stroke Awareness Month, and the real aim over the past few weeks has been to improve stroke prevention and, crucially, recognition so people who've had a stroke can get medical treatment as quickly as possible. Gillian Horsey is the lead nurse for stroke with the Department of Health. And Gill, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. You look a little nervous.
Hey,
it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Yeah, it's fine. So, I mean, I was talking about the fact it's about raising awareness. It's about improving prevention. Let's just go back to basics, if you like, first of all. And can you just explain exactly what a stroke is?
Yeah, I mean, so a stroke is when an area of your brain dies. So it can die for multiple reasons, but they're normally through a blockage or through a bleed in one of the vessels within your head. And that bit of brain doesn't tend to recover, but we have parts of our brain that sit around and do nothing, and we teach that to do what the dead bit used to do in part of the recovery from stroke.
So in that regard then, are there different types of stroke that you can have?
Yeah, lots of different types. The main two are what they call ischemic, which is like from a blockage, or are hemorrhagic. But you can also have other types which bleed into the areas around the brain as well.
And is there a particular cause? Is there something that we know is the main contributory factor?
Yeah, well, there's two types of factors. There's things you can change and things you can't. So the things you can change are your lifestyle, so smoking, exercise, drinking. All those things will help reduce our risk of stroke, healthy lifestyles. But actually the things you can't change is getting older. So being over 65 is high risk for stroke, and unfortunately being female.
Yes, I was just going to ask, actually, is it true that women are more susceptible?
Yeah, it's part to do with the fact that women live longer, so they have more strokes, so there's a higher risk. But also, women are more susceptible to heart disease and things if they smoke. So it's exactly the same kind of risk factors for stroke.
And childbirth as well? Is there something to do with childbirth?
You can have strokes in childbirth. Our clotting in our body changes when we're pregnant. So yes, you can get a result as a stroke as a result of childbirth, but luckily they're fairly rare.
Okay, so the main thing then, if you suspect somebody has suffered a stroke, is to get them help as soon as possible.
Yeah.
How do you know it has happened to someone?
So the big promotion through the Stroke Association and the message we sell is the FAST campaign. So looking for facial weakness. Can they smile? Is their face equal? Arm weakness. So if you hold both hands up, does one arm fall to the ground before the other one? And speech. Seeing if when they're speaking, are they slurring their words? Do the words they use make sense? Do they understand the words that you use? And then phoning 999. So it's face, arm, speech and times for FAST.
And I mean, you talk about the fact that the part of the brain that dies doesn't really recover. So are you always left with some long-term effect after you've had one? No,
it very much depends on which part of the brain died, how quickly you can get help. So now there are treatments out there that can help reverse the effects of stroke. If people come to hospital quickly enough, we can give medication that actually dissolves the clot and can reperfuse, get the blood back into that area of the brain. But also your age. So the younger you are, the more, we call it plastic, so the more responsive your brain is, so the quicker you recover, the better your recovery.
I mean, you talked about the fact that getting older is one of the main causes, but it does happen to really young people.
It does happen to really young people. So you can actually have a stroke in the womb. as much as you can have a stroke when you're 90. They're, like I say, they're rarer and people adapt better when they're younger, but yeah, you can have a stroke at any age.
We were talking in the room there before we came on about the fact that there's a lot of misinformation out there about strokes, and I'm going to ask you more about that in a second. But interestingly, I wanted to raise an article with you, and it is one of those misinformation articles, so I'm just going to mention it because there was something in the press recently. There was an Australian neurologist who was saying that women have a unique way of presenting the signs of stroke, and she was saying rather than it being the difficulty speaking, drooping on one side of the face like you were suggesting, she was saying, oh well, actually they'd have generalised weakness, fatigue, mental status changes and reduced consciousness. Now you were saying that's not true.
No, I mean, particular types of stroke may present those symptoms, but the reality is stroke affects one side of your brain, and our right hand side of our brain controls our left hand side of our body, so it causes symptoms on the opposite side. That general fatigue, that general malaise, we would be looking for something else that's causing those problems, and it's not specific to women at all.
So in terms of knowing your own risk factor, obviously you know if you're drinking too much or smoking too much, but keeping an eye on your blood pressure is key, I suppose, to keeping on top of it.
Yeah, we do lots of campaigns with the Stroke Association and the Manx Stroke Foundation. So there's a Know Your Own Blood Pressure campaign, and we'll be at various places all throughout the year. On the island, we've recently done the DOI, where we take staff's blood pressure or people's blood pressure, and we provide them advice on anything they may do to act on that to prevent a stroke. At those events, we also do something called the Act First campaign as well, which is about an abnormal heart rhythm called atrial fibrillation that is a massive risk factor for stroke. And if we can treat people with AF before they get to a stroke, then actually we will have a significant impact on the bigger strokes, as people with the abnormal heart rhythm tend to have the larger, more debilitating strokes.
And would you recommend, taking something like an aspirin every day, which is obviously reduces clotting? No, you're shaking your head at me.
No, I wouldn't. No, you shouldn't take medication routinely unless there's a good clinical need for it. And if your GP thinks that that's a benefit to you, then absolutely that's the right thing to do. But just doing it off our own back, nothing doesn't have side effects, and we shouldn't put ourselves at risks of the side effects of medication because we think it might help with another part. You should always do these things under good clinical guidance.
So from what you've said, Gill, there must be a fair few people affected by stroke here on the island.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have a higher percentage of strokes on the Isle of Man than our equivalent UK populations, and we don't really know why that is. It isn't just age related. We have a lot of strokes under the age of 65. So in the UK, 1 in 4 people under the age of 65 are affected by stroke. Our Isle of Man statistics are 1 in 3.
Wow,
it's a lot higher.
And in terms of support available over here for anyone who's had one or anyone who's caring for somebody, what is there?
Yeah, we're quite well served with our local charity. So the Manx Stroke Foundation are absolutely superb. And actually without them, Stroke Association wouldn't exist on the Isle of Man, and my job wouldn't exist. They campaigned for years to get an effective stroke service. So they've done an awful lot for stroke on the island. They offer not just financial assistance, but they also offer carer support, just social activities and getting you out the house more than anything else as well. We have 2 Life After Stroke coordinators as well on the island who work in the community. They work for the Stroke Association, but the Department of Health commission them, and they're there to get people access to the right services, just to listen to their concerns. They run support groups, they do all sorts of things. And then obviously there's myself and the hospital team who, at the minute, we're doing a pilot where when somebody's discharged with a stroke, we provide 6 weeks of therapy within their own home as they would have got within the hospital. And hopefully that's something that will end up being a permanent fixture.
And how likely are you, I'm going to guess it depends on what kind of and severity of stroke you have, but how likely are you to be able to return to, sort of some semblance of normality?
Yeah, normality is I think it's a very difficult word and subject. I would say, and I'm sure Shaun would agree with me, that you're never the same after you've suffered something like this. Even if you regain full function and everything's okay, it changes you. It's the proverbial bus. So you get hit by the bus and you never quite look at the world the same way. And I class myself really fortunate. I deal with people who've been hit by this bus, and the strength in human nature to then overcome it that I get to see on a daily basis is very humbling for me. And I think that recovery from stroke is often in not only just gaining function back, but also accepting disabilities that don't necessarily make you less able, or they don't necessarily change you negatively. And that's actually a big part of my job, is getting people to see that even with a disability after their stroke, they're still very amazing, useful people.
Well, you mentioned Shaun. Let's meet Shaun now. Thank you so much for being with us, Shaun Wilde. You had a stroke back in August 2015. Tell us what happened.
Basically, I woke up one morning and felt sick and lightheaded, and a few hours later I started to slur my words a bit like now, and my mum called 999 and I went from there.
I mean, we were talking about the fact that this does happen to young people. How old were you, Shaun?
I was 14.
That's amazing. So you went to hospital, and how serious was it?
It was
Okay, Gill. I mean, it is obviously.
It was a serious stroke. Are you all right for me to say? Yeah. So Shaun had part of his brainstem affected, which meant he had something called locked-in syndrome, which is very rare, but equally as rare to be able to break out from it as Shaun has. And the recovery he's made is fairly incredible.
Really is. I mean, he's back to work, and just you were talking about the strength of character. It really is incredible.
Yeah, and it helped Shaun. He was such a fit, healthy man, and he had a very healthy mind. Well, you still do, don't you? Does a lot of yoga, and we think that's actually made such a difference.
I think.
Yeah. And a bit of a fan of Liverpool. Should we mention that now?
No, we've all got our flaws.
So just explain a little bit so that people know, because I think it's an incredible recovery you've had. So just explain a bit about what locked-in syndrome actually means for us.
Basically, I couldn't speak or move anything at all. Only my eyes.
Wow.
And Gill, you were saying that it's incredibly rare for people to break out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of people, unfortunately, don't make it through the first few months because your breathing's affected as much as all your other muscle control. So, Shaun, you spent 3 months actually just moving your eyes, didn't you? And was unable to do anything else for 3 months. But his strength of character and his determination meant that after 3 months, just started little movements in the fingers. We were all so excited. And then it just went on from there. And you went over to Liverpool for the big part of your rehabilitation to a specialist centre.
7 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you're saying how rare it is. You're one of only 15 people in the world, Shaun.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. And you also said, Gill, how much of an impact Shaun's recovery has been to everyone at the hospital that's dealt with him.
Yeah, I think you get, unfortunately, a little used to... We kind of accept being ill as we get older. We've got wear and tear in our bodies. It's a thing that happens to all of us, and it doesn't change that we don't try and get people better and fight for them. But I think to always be faced by your own mortality of somebody your own age who does similar things to you in life is always a little bit of a surprise. And across the hospital, you touched a lot of people who still check and make sure he's doing okay and want to know that he's still progressing, because actually it means so much to them to know that that's out there.
Well, can't tell you how lovely it is to have both of you with us this afternoon. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. We'll talk a little bit more about what's been happening for Stroke Awareness Month on the island a little bit later. You're listening to Women Today. It's 22 minutes past 2 now. I'm going to be perfectly honest. But yes, anyway, we'll put all those details about how you can sponsor Jeanette and Leonie on the Women Today Facebook page. 29 minutes to 3. We've been talking about stroke awareness as we approach the end of Stroke Awareness Month, and Gillian Horsey and Shaun Wilde are with us. Gill, you are the lead nurse for stroke here in the Isle of Man. What exactly does your day job involve?
Yeah, I have a great job, in fairness. I love my job. So I'm fortunate enough to be involved in the entire stroke pathway. So I will meet people in accident and emergency when they come in via ambulance, and I'll see them all the way up to 2-3 years post-discharge, as long as they need me. So my job is to coordinate their care, make sure they receive the treatment they need, support their family, make sure the right disciplines and things are involved. But I also lead the service, so the service development, making sure we keep with the times, we move forward, and we're getting all the right information and support in place for people.
And we were talking at the start of the show about how crucial it is really to detect stroke early and get help as soon as possible. What if that doesn't happen?
Well, if it doesn't happen, so if people don't get help very quickly, we're limited on the immediate treatments we can give them. And people do better in recovery from stroke if they can get either into hospital or into what they call organised stroke care. So for us, that's our stroke ward. And that's not just for the medication we can give them, but that's because the complications of stroke are very specific to stroke, such as problems with your swallow and chest infections and muscle spasms in things like your bladder, and the staff on the ward are well trained to help deal with them, and they improve people's outcomes at 6 months if they can get hold of them nice and quickly.
And you were saying as well that you have great connections with Walton as well, so if anyone needs sort of specialist treatment, like for instance we were talking about with Shaun, then they can go there.
Yeah, so Walton Neuro Centre is our local specialist centre, for want of a better phrase for them, and they're absolutely superb. They're very responsive to us asking them any questions, but also if people need further rehabilitation or more specialist rehabilitation, then they're happy to refer them and then take them when they're able to. And Shaun was a really good case for that.
Yeah. I was there for 7 months and they were great. I couldn't speak more highly of them. Yeah.
Wow, and it sounds like they'd speak very highly of you as well. You were instrumental in starting things like the art group as well there, wasn't he, Gill?
Yeah. So when he came back, I just got this list of things he'd been involved in, and then he pops out in their Neuro Matters magazine, and he was in everything. I think his mum couldn't keep him still.
Go ahead, sure.
I was going to say, even though I'm useless at art.
Still encouraging others, though. You mentioned obviously being there for such a long time, for 7 months, and you mentioned sort of family there. What sort of support is there for family? Could they be over there with you at any point?
They can stay on site upstairs. There's about, I think there's 7 rooms, and they can stay there as long as they want. Yeah. So that's very handy, and obviously saves money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, brilliant.
And it's really important, isn't it, Gill, to have the support of people around you as well during what is an incredibly difficult time.
Yeah, it makes it so much better if your family are with you, but also if they're a little strict as well. So it does you the world of good for your family to say, no, I'm not going to do that for you. You need to do this. So we're all probably guilty, us included, of probably caring and fussing too much sometimes. And actually one of the key things in stroke recovery is getting on with it. So I talk about that thing where patients get hit by this bus. Well, if you'd been hit by a bus, they'd let you lie in bed and they'd let you have a bit of rest and recuperation. But actually, when you have a stroke and you come into us, we go, oh, I'm sorry, you can't lie in bed. You'll need to get up now, please. And some physio and OT will come along and they'll start getting you moving, because the sooner you move, the more you do, the better your recovery is. So yeah, you don't get a chance to chill out and relax. So your family being strong for you in terms of getting you to be as independent as possible is so important.
And speaking of being independent, with Shaun now being back at work, and you're at Crow Morgan, aren't you?
Yes.
What sort of support have they been there for you? Because that's important too, isn't it?
They've been fantastic and offered any kind of support that I need, and so if there's anything I want, I can have. They've been fantastic.
So just thinking about rehabilitation and sort of getting that sense of normality back in your life, Gill, I mean, are you ever left with any sort of emotional legacy with regard to going through this, and your effect on mood, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. So post-stroke depression or emotional changes after a stroke affects over 60% of people who've had it. So it's really normal and doesn't tend to occur in the initial period. The initial period, you're very busy, lots of people around you doing lots of things. It's when you perhaps go home and you recognise that you are more different than perhaps you thought you were. And actually post-stroke depression is really... It's really high on our kind of things to look for and make sure we're supporting people through. And people almost have to grieve for who they were to be able to start accepting and moving on with how they are. But also it affects your ability to control your emotions. So some people may cry very easily and not be able to control that. And other people may laugh hysterically all the time and not be able to control that. I saw your hand go up in the corner there. and that can be quite socially isolating at times if you think that somebody says hello and they're nice to you and then suddenly you're crying, and it's quite a hard thing to say, well, I'm just going to do it anyway because it's okay that I do it.
And that's why it's so important, isn't it, to have awareness months where you're kind of talking about this sort of thing and people recognise it and are more comfortable with it. We've had a text from Brian who says, I had a TIA in 2012. I'm okay now apart from some memory loss. I didn't know it was the awareness month in May. Recognition of TIA is important in my opinion. I knew because I'd done a first aid course a few years before. Some people might have dismissed a funny turn, which is a really good point. Just explain what a TIA is for us.
So TIA is what they call a transient ischemic attack. And actually, funny turn's a great term for it because it's part of a national campaign that says it's not just a funny turn. So it's almost like your warning sign for stroke. So people get little bits of angina for heart attacks and things. TIAs are the same for stroke. They're very small blockages that cause transient effects, so things that may last a few seconds to a few hours and then they go away. So what you find when people have had a stroke is they'll come in and they'll say, oh, my arm did go numb a few times, but I just thought I'd caught it on something and I gave it a shake, or I went to bed and it went away. And actually there, if you can treat them at that point, you can hopefully prevent the main event happening and prevent strokes occurring. So if you do have these episodes, see your GP. We have rapid access clinics where we assess and see people within 72 hours to help prevent that stroke occurring.
And how closely after you've had a TIA would you be monitored after that?
In what term?
In long term. So would you keep having to go for regular checkups to make sure everything was okay?
You shouldn't do. In the initial phase, we'll do a series of investigations, but your GP would then, we'd do the initial things, looking at your brain, looking at the vessels that supply your head, giving you the right preventative medication, information about lifestyle changes. And then they're the things that your GPs are absolutely superb at, you know, that kind of long-term blood pressure management and things. And so we would work with them for them to carry that on.
So we are talking about this because May is the awareness month. What sort of things have been happening over here, Gill?
Yeah, so we've done quite a bit this year. We decided we needed to do more about it. And our biggest thing was we did the Step Out for Stroke walk. So we set it up thinking, 20 people come, family and friends, it'd be absolutely lovely. And then we thought, well, 50 would be a good turnout. Then 184 turned up, which really took us by surprise. And I mean, it was amazing to see this sea of purple, and we had all sorts of people. We had people who'd had a stroke themselves who could only do short distances, people who'd lost somebody from a stroke as well, other people doing it just for themselves because they'd been affected by stroke. So it was absolutely phenomenal. And I mean, ShopRite sponsored us for doing that and gave us water and things for it, and loads of local companies were really good with it. Rehab Lab Physio came along and did a warm-up session, and I still can't get over how many people were there and how amazing it looked. I'm still in shock from it all.
Well, brilliant. We are talking about stroke awareness, and we're with Gill and Shaun. You're listening to Women Today on Manx Radio. It's 20 to 3 now. Now, Gill, you've got 2 boys. Are they into Lego?
Oh, yeah, massively.
Really?
Yeah, they're 9 and 10, and they've spent years building Lego, and yeah, it's everywhere.
I think I fell out of love with Lego the moment I walked into one of my
Stood
son's
on it.
bedrooms and stood on it in the dark.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not good. That's really not good. And the other thing is, if we go back to the Lego movie, those who have seen it, I possibly would be the person who would glue it together. You spend all that time and you follow the instructions, and for them just to tear it apart in seconds. I'm sorry. That's really
my
annoying.
eldest son.
But you could be creating the engineers of the future here, because I know certainly my nephews are massively into Lego, and they're creating these fantastic structures, sort of bridges and car parks and all kinds of things. Between that and Meccano, I think we've got some engineers on our hands there. But it's true, it is, like you said, it sort of has a serious background to this, because there is the idea that it's helping investigate child mental health and how important play is, which we've talked about on the show before with Chris from the Children's Centre. He's been on talking to us about that. So I will genuinely be interested to see what they find out, or if he does just basically sit in his office all day and play with Lego.
Howard wonders if the professor will have 15-minute work time breaks every morning and afternoon.
I will ask him for you, Howard.
Yeah. No, it is interesting. And Lego, it is great. I'm sure it is great. The thing is, we don't ever need to buy any more sets. All I need are the little booklets to make it, because we have a box big enough to make a Lego anything. I'm convinced, absolutely convinced. Were you really into Lego?
I loved Lego. Yeah, I really loved it as a kid. But now I think a lot of it seems to be done for you. Like, you can get those sets where there's bits of it already constructed.
Brilliant.
Or
Love that.
Okay, I'm a massive fan of Star Wars, and you can buy sort of the Star Wars things mostly constructed already. So that seems like a bit of a cheat to me.
No. It saves you hours. Save you absolutely hours. And then when you drop it on the floor and some child takes it somewhere else and you can't find that last piece, and oh no, there's no fun there. There's no fun.
Oh, Beth, I feel for you. I think you're missing out here. I really do.
And do we have to have girl and boy Lego? This is another discussion,
No.
right? But then you have these pink Lego sets that, would any of your boys play with a pink Lego set?
I daren't admit what my children have for fear of them disowning me.
You have to tell us in a moment. 14 minutes to 3.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Women Today.
We have been talking about Stroke Awareness Month that's been happening for the past few weeks here in the Isle of Man, and loads of things going on around the island. We were talking about the walk that was on the promenade that nearly 200 people took part in. There were talks all around the place. I mean, it raised a significant amount of money, Jill.
Yeah, I think so. We haven't had a final figure on it all yet, but it wasn't actually our aim this year. We just wanted to raise the profile of stroke and raise awareness rather than raise money. And people, typical for the Isle of Man, overly generous. They just give it without even being asked. So, yeah.
And if anybody has been listening and they're affected by anything that we've been talking about, they're worried about themselves, they're worried about someone else, what would you suggest is their first port of call?
Well, there's 2 websites they could get in touch with. So there's the Stroke Association, which is www.stroke.org.uk, or there's the Manx Stroke Foundation, which is www.manxstrokefoundation.org.
Wonderful, and we'll put those details on the Women Today blog. Jill and Shaun, thank you so much for being with us. I should point out that Shaun was walking up the steps here, and we were sort of saying, are you okay? But you actually work on the 6th floor, and don't bother taking the lift.
No. Just make my way up the stairs very slowly. Very slowly.
Jill, Shaun, thank you so much for being with us today. On the programme tomorrow, it's a Conister Rock special, and our guest will be Derek Flint, who's just retired after nearly 30 years in the police force. So please do join us for that.